maybe fix up my hair a bit. But then, in just a few moments, Tengu will be joining. So, yeah, we'll do the stream. This is just a boo-boo on my part. I woke up too late. So, yeah, whoops. Let's see. Yeah, this should work. All right, all right, all right. Oh, I forgot to pin this. All right, so what has it been? In about 3 minutes, Tengu will join. I fixed this a bit faster than I expected. So I told him in about 5 minutes instead of 10 that he can join. But now I got it done quicker. So he can join whenever, but I think he'll go for 5. So we'll see. Anyways, whoever is here, good morning. Here at least it's good morning, so good day. And I'm excited to talk to Tengu finally. Hey, Pacific Brawling. What up? Here it's morning. I slept through all my alarm clocks and I woke up just before the stream. And then I started frantically setting everything up. And I saw that, yeah, I'm not going to do it in time. So here we are. I'm just drinking my coffee and I'm just getting ready. And my hair is a mess. So that's also a thing. Oh, damn. Let's see. It is okay. In a minute. Is my audio okay? You can hear me well and all is good, right? Oh, did I live chat? Yes. Oof. Oh, 4 a.m. Wow. Now that is a time zone. That is a time zone situation right there. Good on you. I'm not sure would I be able to do it. Oh, awesome. Loud and clear. That's great. That's good. Let's see. The screen might freeze for a moment, but I'll be back in a couple of seconds. I'm just gonna check the messages with Tengu. That's all. All right. There we go. He should be. Oh. Hey.
Howdy.
Howdy.
All right. Hopefully the lighting isn't bad here. My completely tech illiterate ass tried to get on my computer, so I'm like,
That's all right.
Got a jerry rig.
That's totally okay. I think I'm also not in the best neither shape nor light nor position. But
Yeah, I tried to crack open Windows, but we'll see how well that pops up on screen. So, all right, I think
all
I'm
right,
good to go.
welcome, welcome. I've been thinking, like, since ever you mentioned that we could do a stream, I just realized, like, this is technically also a face reveal, right? Like on YouTube.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yeah,
Awesome.
I don't usually. It's not for any like privacy reasons or anything like that. I just don't really like that format. It's just an extra layer of editing. And
Right.
I already don't like how my voice shows up online. So just dealing with my face is a whole other thing.
Well, I mean, I feel both honored and what's the other word? That the face reveal happened on Marshall Geeks. That's great.
Yeah, it did. It did. Yeah, I didn't really think about that, but you are correct. It did happen here.
Wow. Um, so yeah, yeah. That's pretty cool. My hair looks horrible, but we'll try and ignore that because I literally woke up about like 20 minutes ago.
Man, I know how that goes. I appreciate you accommodating the really weird time difference because we're like what 7 hours apart.
7 hours,
So
right? So
yeah,
here it's 5 p.m. at your place, right?
that is correct. It is 5 p.m.
Here it's 10-ish a.m. So
Yeah, well, hopefully the light stays good, well enough for me here. If not, I can turn on the room light.
right,
But
right.
I think I'm showing up okay, considering that this is on my ancient phone. Um,
That's good.
but it's all good.
Well,
What's on the menu today?
on the menu is I have no clue, but I feel it's gonna be.
Fantastic.
I think it's gonna be a lot about Aikido, a bit about Judo, and the criticism of Aikido, criticism of Japanese martial arts.
Yeah, that'll that always gets me into trouble because
Right,
the Aikido stuff is just so polarizing, unfortunately, where
right,
taking the moderate position, because I honestly don't feel like I ever post anything that's too crazy and out of like too extreme one way or the other, but there's always some guy on one end of the spectrum that'll either be like, man, that art is shit, stop wasting your time, or well, you just haven't had the spiritual connection with O
right.
Sensei, so you don't know what you're talking. Like, guys, can we find find the sanity in the middle of those two positions before we start having a conversation?
Right, right. It's crazy. It's crazy because I don't know. I've To me, when I would like engage with people, especially in Aikido, lot of times it would be like a situation where I mention that I don't actually like I haven't formally ever trained Aikido. I
Hmm.
just enjoy some of its techniques, concepts, and I always wanted to understand it a bit better because to me, when I see, oh, everybody says this sucks, I want to know why. I want to I want to see what it is.
Well, right.
And
Right. It is very much like that where it's just like go actually play with this stuff at the bare minimum. Finding a good Aikido place is kind of like finding a needle in a haystack, honestly. So I don't blame anybody for who like don't want to go out and find the place. Even in Japan, where you would think that like good training areas would be growing on trees, it's not like that. I've been to several dojos here where I'm like, yeah, this is kind of ass. I'm not really a fan. um but it is what it is. If you do find a good place, then that's fantastic, and that's not to say they aren't out there. They are, but I definitely think in the West in particular, the your odds of finding a good place are decreasing. The art itself is aging. It's mostly old men now that do aikido, and even if they were super martial and practical at one point, just by nature of getting older, which is something that happens to all of us,
yeah,
they might not be able to show you that stuff live in a way that people respect, I guess, that they want to see. Um, and then there's
Right.
just other problems too, with like just how it's taught and whatnot. So it's like it's good to actually train it if you can find the place, and people are willing to train. What's the word I'm looking for? Flexibly,
Right.
but
Right.
good luck finding that place though.
Right.
So
That's no easy task, right? And I'm just thinking how hard it was here for me to like settle down. I think I remember the community post where you discussed about like how hard it is to find like a place for you to train in such a niche position. And I absolutely felt that in my core because even right now, where we mostly train, where we are part of a like JJIF Jiu-Jitsu dojo, even
mhm.
there, it's like we wish that we could do this and that and all kinds of stuff. So it's so hard to actually place yourself when you have like a very specific idea of what you want to do. And it
Yeah,
almost never ever fits with what you want to do unless it's your own gym. And we're in no
right,
position to have our own gym. And even then, it's like you have to manage it, you have to pay for it.
exactly.
So even that is not easy. So I don't know. I think people don't appreciate how hard it is to actually like put yourself when you have a distinct goal or whatever, especially online, because a lot of people would attack me when I would mention, of course, YouTube trolls and everything. Like I
Sure.
would mention, I did an Aikido class because I was fortunate enough. One of our members, he's a fourth degree Aikido black belt, and now I consider him sort of an Aikido mentor in terms of like just my proper lens to what I always wanted to learn, but we don't actually do Aikido classes that much, just
Sure.
barely. And I mentioned
Yeah.
that, immediately got attacked. And then but guys, calm down. I also fought in the ring. I'm also a
Yeah.
mixed martial artist. I'm just doing this for me.
Right.
Plus, even if like, why do you care? Let me do my thing.
Yeah, people are weirdly invested, in what other people are doing online, which is very strange. And you've gone one step farther than I have, even with the competition and things. I've done kind of like the traditional point sparring competition, which I hate actually. I don't like it. I used to do it a long time ago. I used to have really high level athletes in that kind of sphere around me. Like we sent some people to like Pan Am's and things like that. This was all before karate got into the Olympics. That was a fiasco too. So it's probably for the best. So it's like, and I've done like some light competition in judo and things like that. But as for like arenas where you can go and do aikido, it's rough because, well, like even if you find that golden group of guys who like, yeah, let's go train this for real, you're correct, unless you have your own place, which you got to find a brick and mortar location. You got to set up a time frame where everybody can show up, and there's got to be some kind of like liability waiver. You got to have probably a lawyer on staff because if somebody does something stupid, then you're getting sued, and then you're not training. Apart from just losing your income. So it's like there's a lot of difficult components to that, and on top of that, if you want to find a place to do like the standing joint locks, in Japan, they just have this reputation for being hyper dangerous. And in
Ooh,
some ways, that's true, I guess. But I think that notion comes from the old judo perspective, where he Kano removed all of the standing locks, well, most of them, from the judo randori curriculum, and it's kind of stuck. But that position has been around since like 1900, 1910. Maybe it's time to kind of reassess that, in my view.
yes.
But
I
yeah, for now, you're correct too, in the sense that I think BJJ gyms are probably where a lot of this stuff happens, because they're usually the ones where it's like, yeah, nobody's using the mat right now. Knock yourself out. As long as you're not doing anything stupid, you can use the space. So otherwise you're kind of on your own. Like I said in that community post, I've been trying to find a location that'll let me do at least some semblance of this training, and like so far there's been a couple that maybe are promising, but Japanese martial arts want to do Japanese martial arts, and that's you can't blame people for that. There's very much truth to the idea that like if you are a BJJ gym and people show up and you're like, well, I want to practice Aikido, they're going to look at you funny because they're there to practice jujitsu. So it's hard to recruit people for these kinds of side quests. But I think it needs to be done, at least in the Aikido sense.
Right. I think the best way to sort of segue and make a person train Aikido with you, if you're in that hypothetical space where you're just screwing around with some guys, you get BJJ guys or grapplers who are fine with getting wrist locked, who are fast at point.
Yeah.
You do a kuregaishi on them, they'll want to do it. They'll want to learn. They'll be like, okay,
yeah,
that's cool.
yeah.
Then you can do Aikido.
Right, exactly, and I've had some success with that too, because that's this kind of similar to how you get them to do takedowns too. You throw them once, and they're like, "Oh shit, what did you do to me?" So, and I had some success. I was actually training very, very briefly with the very nice guy, by the way. If you ever are in Japan, this is for anybody in chat too, and you are a jiu-jitsu person. I was training very briefly at the Imanari gym of Imanari roll fame, and people there were pretty open to just kind of jerking around, and like there was no issues with goofing around with this kind of stuff. The only problem I had with it was that it's just I don't know how I landed in the one part of Tokyo that's kind of a black hole for martial arts, but it's like an hour and a half away, on top of tuition fees and entrance fees and all that kind of stuff, and it's just like right now I just got a new job, and the time frame is going to be kind of weird. It's like from 11 in the morning to like 8 at night, and it's an hour south of me, so it's an hour there and an hour back. So I basically need to find some place that I can train in the mornings or weird hours in the evenings. There is a kudo place nearby that I'm kind of looking like that looks like their gym is open basically all the time. So maybe I'll do that. But I want to like get into my work schedule before I kind of make that commitment. Be like, yeah, this is definitely what I'm going to do. There was, like I said, an Aikido place too that was nearby, but I'm like, they're not even sweating over here. It's like it's not enough. It's just not enough. And I have nothing against people that want to kind of do like the Tai Chi version of it. It's just not for me. It's like I'm not one of those people who are like, oh, we got to get rid of this. I don't think that's the case. In fact, I think most Aikido dojos, like if I were going to run an Aikido place, right? Theoretically, I would probably have a class that is kind of like for making it look pretty and making it look smooth, because people should have that option. But then, right after that would be the class where we're going to try and wrench each other's shoulders off. And you can come to both or none or
That's
one or the other.
That's exactly how the Aikido guy from our gym, Kresho, he that's how he did his training a long time ago when he had his own gym. That's exactly
Yeah.
what they would do. And
Yeah, and
he
I
also
think that's
did kids classes sometimes. And of
Mhm.
course, because here in Croatia, judo culture is quite big. Everybody's into
Yeah.
judo, much more than wrestling. Nobody really does wrestling on like a national level, but judo is
Mhm.
pretty. So when they would do like with play around with kids and train them, they'd also do some rudimentary judo because there's similar stuff. So a lot of kids from his Aikido classes would learn the kesagatame, some basic stuff, and this and that. But then with the like adults afterward, they'd be like, okay, so let's do some aikijitsu now. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of my background too, believe it or not. The before I guess it was technically before mixed martial arts. It was probably around the same time, but like the system that I kind of grew up in, very literally, like from 5 years old, I was in this system, and I still train with these guys when I'm back in the states. They have basically they do judo, they do karate, and they do aikido, and they teach them all as separate disciplines. But the idea is basically when you get to a high enough level, all that stuff kind of comes together and gets integrated. Now, obviously that's not a totally like novel idea. Kudo kind of does similar things, just minus the wrist locks. Of course, MMA exists. All of that is in the jacket, which does kind of give it a different flavor, I guess. But yeah, like I've been in karate and judo longer than I've been in aikido, and in fact, the first several years of my aikido career, I hated it. It was I despised it. I did not like the love and peace message. And then I kind of came around to it, and then I came here and did history on it and realized actually it's bullshit anyway. So the guy the that whole love and peace thing, I met something very different to the guy who founded the art than I think most of my American peers assume. And that's not why I do it. Like you, I think I'm just kind of interested in the techniques.
Yeah.
It's not about the. I think like being part of a tradition is cool. Like I've got kind of a bit of a uh, infatuation with like that time period and things like that. There's buildings around Tokyo that were built from that time period that are beautiful, and I like being attached to a tradition, but it's not so important to me where I'm like, ah, man, we've got to sacrifice or we can't change ever. That's a little silly, and like I think people lie to themselves a little bit too about that because there are very traditional martial arts that change all the time through human error, and some people will just sneak things in. I know that my thesis advisor was actually in the Kashima Shinto Ryu school, and his thing was that people would deliberately misremember while their teacher was alive, so they would like make a change, and then if their teacher said anything, oh, like, oh, sorry, and then when he would leave, they would just keep training the way that they were
Right.
training, and that's how they would kind of institute things. I don't think we got to be that shady about it.
Sure.
But I get it, navigating Japanese culture to a certain extent.
Yeah, and
um
it's crazy. If I can interject, I don't want to like
sure, no,
cut.
go for it.
I have a history of cutting people off with my rambly thoughts, so
Well, some of that's the time lag too in between us. That's fine, go ahead.
sure. But I was gonna say the whole notion of like this is a traditional martial art, this is a modern combat sport. All of that is far less like simple and then clear cut when you're trying to actually like if you're just being like surface leveled about it where oh yeah boxing yeah that's not a traditional martial art when you're just trying to make that quick division but not actually like think and research what it should mean in terms of like instead like usage versus meaning thing because karate sure it's a traditional martial art but compare what it was in the beginning compare it to now how is that a successful what would that be successful preservation of the tradition when it's so different than what it was and same
Right.
with BJJ where BJJ has incredible amounts of flags that could make it a traditional martial art now but it's considered a modern combat sport and
Right.
so it's not that clear cut it's not that simple so
It isn't clear cut, and honestly, I feel like the traditionalists get the tradition wrong anyway. So,
right.
it's like I know that there's a. I think I'm gonna toss it. I'm making a put in a video together now, and I'm not sure what form it's gonna take exactly, but there's this whole thing in Aikido where it's like, oh, Aikido people don't touch legs. Um, like with their hands, and I'm like, first of all, that's stupid. I've always learned aikido, for example, by touching the legs. But beyond that, there's these photos that float around. I'm like, here's a photo of the founder doing a single leg in an
Single
aikido dojo. It's like, how do you rectify that? And I don't think people, I've met people who will be like, oh, well, that's when he sucked, and it's like, okay, that's a class A deflection. um it's like that's just don't be stupid. Or there's a video that I just found recently, through the superpowers of being able to search things in Japanese on YouTube, of Daito Ryu, and obviously the predecessor art to Aikido, and there's these kids and they're doing this demonstration, and they're sitting up there practicing elbows, and I'm like, ah, well, that's, it's like the traditional stuff. It's like it's so much more interesting when you actually go and find that tradition. And you know, and like you said with karate is another great example. It's like it used to be so much more of a clinch kind of almost Chinese martial art adjacent. Well, it came from China kind of thing though, where it's like we're gonna strike into you and then we're gonna clinch and then we're gonna punch you around a little bit and then we're gonna throw you. That's kind of I'm oversimplifying. I obviously, there's a ton of Chinese martial arts, but that's kind of the generic strategy. Whereas now it's kind of like get in, score a point, get out, and that's not to say there aren't skills from that you can take, right? But you're right. It's not authentically traditional either. Um, and
Right.
I, I don't know. I think we're going in cycles too, because like BJJ in many ways is kind of what judo was. Now it's more advanced. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it wasn't, but BJJ is kind of what judo was before the bureaucracies that would be interjected and were like, well, we're not gonna focus so much on the groundwork. So I really think a lot of this stuff is just reinvention of the wheel. It's just convincing people that it's worth going back and doing. And unfortunately, in the Aikido space, that's super hard to do. It's kind of you're swimming upstream.
Exactly. It's uh it's the same story we've seen, I think, many times. And just now, since everybody keeps calling this period like the renaissance of martial arts, and with the globalization, the internet, everybody, like the whole planet knows where everybody is, and that's been a fairly recent thing when you think
Yeah,
about it. That's a kind of changes stuff in the grand scheme of things. And it's just now that we feel like, oh, now we know, now we like understand. But it's just that we're aware of different cultures and different people, but it's always been reinventing itself.
right.
So
Yeah, I think about that a lot. There is a part of me that wonders, like now in the internet age, are people on average better martial artists than they were, I don't know, in like 1930. I'm arbitrarily picking a date, but like, has the internet age made people better? And on one hand, like yes, there's people like what's his name, Joseph Chen, right, who of BJJ fame, who kind of taught himself on bootleg instructionals. So in some there's those cases where it's like, yeah, that seems to work, but it also has this weird side effect where it's like now everybody thinks they know something about something. And I think on average, between the internet and between how commodified martial arts have become, on average, we are probably producing a lot of people who know a little bit, but not many people who know a lot. Um, but we are producing a lot of people who think they know a lot. Therefore, you get these comments that are like, "This guy doesn't know what he's talking about." It's like I can show you the photos or the history or the whatever. It's
yeah,
like if I had to say something about this to Aikido, there was one gentleman who I'm going to passive aggressively single out, who is on my in my YouTube comment section where he's like, oh, every video for a while there, he was posting like, when are we going to get the demonstration from Tengu? And I'm like, I'm not gonna post a demonstration for you because of here's a couple things. One, I'm not going to post anything online to prove my own martial prowess. I know where I'm at, and I'm not a super freak athlete. I'm not a crazy competitor. I think I'm decent, but I'm not anything to write home about. That's the first thing. The second thing is, even if I post a demonstration, if it's not educative, it doesn't fit in with the theme of my channel. So I'm not going to post that. And finally, it doesn't matter what I post because I know exactly where this is going. I've been around the bend long enough where it's like, if I post an Aikido demonstration, this guy is just going to be like, that's not real Aikido, and then use it as a soapbox to preach whatever he wants on my comment section. So, like, no, that's stupid. There may come a time where I post videos if I can find a partner in a training space, just to put ideas out there in people's heads, and then they can take that and hopefully it gets into the hands of people who are better than me and more athletic than me, and then they can make something out of it in whatever space they want. I don't think I'm going to be that guy who takes this to some competition and changes the whole face of the game, but I might be that guy who gives people a start or a perspective and then they go and change that. You know, but I'm just, you know, I'm getting older and fatter now that I'm surrounded so much food that's delicious. I need to train myself harder, but I don't think I'm going to be that guy.
Right.
Now that being said, eventually I would like to post, you know, technique videos and things like that, just for people to see. But you know, my wife is a martial artist as well, and I've thought about recruiting her. But there's also something, you know, because this is such a visually it's such a visual space because we're posting videos. When people see me throwing around a you know, an Asian woman who's an inch shorter than me and is
Yeah.
40 pounds lighter, they're gonna be like, oh, then that doesn't work either. And it's just
Right.
like, well, you're
Because she's a
missing the
girl. Yeah.
exactly. It's like I'm just bullying my wife, which is true. I do that, but that's, you know, that's besides the point. Um, so you know, it's like you know, so I got to find a good space and a good partner and who are also willing to be online because they know that's a whole thing too. So it's like, no, I'm not going to post demonstrations. That's a little silly, especially not to satisfy these people who just really want to say, "See, aha, I gotcha," no matter what I post.
The gotcha guys can certainly come to Martial Geeks and watch like hundreds and hundreds of videos of actual like sparring sessions and stuff with this stuff working in various
Yeah,
levels.
well,
I'll
that's the
invite
thing.
people. I'll take
It well,
input.
they're I'll send them your way. That's the thing though, is I don't think these kinds of people would even be satisfied with that. I think, you know, these are the kinds of folks in many regards where it's like the sky is blue and they'll just be like, no, it's not. No,
Yep.
no, no. And it's very frustrating because you really do want to educate people, but you know, it's again, Aikido has this polarizing problem where you have those people within the art who no matter what you post, they're going to say it's inauthentic, it's wrong, it's whatever. And on the other side, you got people who are really into the combat sports, which is fine. You know, I think combat sports are great, but they'll be like, well, it's a waste of time and it's trash. I've seen 2 videos of a guy getting beaten up. Therefore, it's not worth any time. It's like, can we just center ourselves a little bit here and just go and explore this stuff? If you hate it, you don't have to do it. It's not for everybody. You know, it's the same thing as like, you know, I'm just not a big ground game guy. I think it's important, but I'm
Right.
not a big ground game guy. It's just that's just how it is. I'm not a weapons guy either. Just kind of
That-
another meme. You know, another meme that's kind of grown on my channel because there was always going to be someone who's like, "Well, Aikido makes a lot more sense with weapons." I'm like, I don't disagree. Historically, that it does. It makes a lot more sense with weapons. But if we look at, you know, 2024, that's such a niche community, and more
right.
importantly, I'm not interested in making content like that, and it's my channel. So you know, you can go. There's people online who do a much better job of that than I do. Go check out Hema. Go check out Chris Hine, who does pretty good job with Aikido. He doesn't post super regularly at the moment, but
But I put the
um,
video. Yeah.
yeah, I mean those guys do a great job with that. So if people are interested in that kind of thing, I always direct them there. And if people do have questions about things that I'm just not informed with, I always send them to other places. You know, I talk a little bit about wrestling and Muay Thai on my channel, but like I would send them to like, oh, what's his name, the Breza Grappling channel for wrestling. I would send them to Shintaro Higashi for judo. I would send them to I'm gonna butcher her last name, but Sylvie Ito Douglas, something like that. Sylvie something something Muay Thai. She films all the old Muay Thai guys, and she has like a gazillion Muay Thai fights as well. It's like these are people who are much more experienced than I am to talk on these. I'm just kind of an idea guy and a history nerd. And yeah, sometimes I do spar. It's like, and that's pretty much it. I would not take my advice as a starting point, not an end point. You know, I am not a definitive thing. I do feel like I have things to say about Aikido that a lot of Aikido guys get wrong, but that's
Yeah.
also because I think I've trained a lot harder than most Aikido people have in that space. The university experience I'm now discovering was a super rare. Whoops, my phone's on low power. My was a super rare experience to have, even in Japan.
Right.
Like I said, a lot of the dojos I've been to have not been that impressive, but you know the university experience, I was training like 25 hours a week.
Ooh.
I just Aikido. And even if it was kind of more aesthetic based, you can't help but get somewhat good at the technique movements. Now it's just a matter of going and making those things function
Right.
outside of that space, and that's where we get to, well, what can we incorporate? 2-on-1s, I don't
Yes.
know, arm in headlocks, that kind of thing. Anything that isolates the arm, just taking these different ideas and trying to apply that stuff, I think is a good spot. And then we come full circle though to then you got to find the people, find the space, find the yada 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 yada. So it's very grassroots.
Almost harder than the training itself.
It is so much harder than the training itself to find the right people and the right mindset. And it's like, even if you find one guy, that's awesome and that's a start. But eventually you got to train with different body types and things. So, it's just rough. It's
Which,
very difficult.
regarding the body type and how it depends on people. So Martial Geeks, there's 5 of us that started the whole thing, but
Yeah.
essentially everybody that joined over time and all the friends and everybody that trains with us, it's like an extended Martial Geeks family. And there's just a single person who, so we all rolled with each other billions of times and sparred billions of times in different rule sets. Just one person escaped my koregaeshi. A single person. And it's the guy who has hyper flexible wrists. He can bend them in any way he wants. And
Yep.
he revealed that after a few rolling sessions when I tried so hard to do the koregaeshi. So it
Yeah.
doesn't work for some people, no matter how good it is. Like,
Well, and that's true of anything. You take the most basic, like, single leg takedowns, for example. There's this notion that, like, some of these techniques work all the time on everybody, and that's just not true. That's not how it works. There's a reason why judo guys spend most of their careers developing like 3 techniques, really. Like, they're good at all of them, but they're only, take an Olympian for example, they're only Olympic level at like 2, 3 maybe. And that's it. That's their whole career, is, maybe like Uchimata, Osotogari, Tomoe-nage, or something like that. And that's
and
their whole career.
exactly. And that also sometimes like annoys me in like discussions about this stuff when I do show like in sparring sessions that I did like a fancy elbow lock, wrist lock, shoulder lock, anything from Aikido, Aikijitsu, that stuff. I openly also say always, look, guys, just before the hate train comes in, these are low percentage techniques. Like, I'm
Yep.
fairly proficient with them, but they're always going to remain that because it's not easy to set them up. It takes a specific circumstance, a specific baiting, this and that, and it
Right.
takes a while before you can actually do, and you can't force them. That's how you get
No.
destroyed. So I
Well,
always say it's a lower percentage technique. But then people say, well, why would you train that if you're not going to use it in like competition? Well, precisely. Look at judokas; they have their own system of a couple of techniques. They're good at all of them,
right.
but they're not going to be able to just in a Sotogari, their Olympic competitor, just like this. While in the
Right.
gym, they pull billions of different techniques, but they have their own system. So it's like, sure, I can train koregaeshi just for the sake of training it. Like, I'm not even modernizing or whatever. I like it. I'm having fun with it. That's
Right.
all.
Right. And sometimes that is enough. I think that's the start, honestly, because if you're not having fun doing what you're doing, you are going to abandon it. That is true of anything in life. If you don't enjoy it, then you're probably not going to get good at it. So I mean, there is that component to it. For me, I am very interested in trying to make these things a little bit more consistent, and that's why I kind of do harp on some of those positional things a little bit more. I really do feel like, and I'm not the guy for this. I probably need to find a wrestling place to teach me how to do this properly. But I really do feel like if you can get to a 2-on-1, where you have that arm locked in, your Sankyo is there, your
Yeah.
Shiho is there, your a lot of stuff is right there, and there is a system there too. If you can't get the Sankyo this way, then you get the Shiho this way. Right? So and if they do this and they tuck and you're in an MMA spot, punch them because they're not
I was going to
they're
say,
not. It's that's the thing that's people kind of mischaracterize some of these techniques, I think, as like their takedowns. And like that's great if you can take a guy down with them. But if you are pulling this arm out of alignment, they're not blocking their face with anything. If you can restrain that, then just elbow them. You're probably in close enough range. And I am a big fan of elbows. That is most of my karate background is elbowing. So people have some of this a little bit goofy where it's like, oh well, if you're not taking them down or you're not tapping them out, then what's the point? And I think some of that is the competition paradigm where people are so used to, if you don't, the goal is tapping them out or the goal is throwing them so to win, therefore what are we doing? And on top of that, aikido has been perhaps mischaracterized as a grappling art, and it is, but I honestly think it's a clinch art,
Yeah.
to use maybe a more specific term. It's like, yeah, if you can take somebody down, but if I had to pick an art that aikido is closest to, or a subsection of an art, I would say that it's like muay kao. It's probably muay thai, but the clinch section. Um, and then if you add those joint locks and stuff where you're tying people up so you can punch them in the face and then you can dispose of them, that's fantastic.
I cannot describe to you how many times in MMA sparring we would just be doing standard stuff, and when I would get a few shots and get the person respecting the punches, cover up a bit, and like get against the cage or the wall or whatever, they would be here. And you know how people shell up
Yep.
from respecting some punches? Boop, quick Kotegaeshi back fist. Right
Yeah.
now. Boop,
When they
Sankyo
shell up.
or Nikyo head kick.
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
it's right there. Doesn't even, most of the time it's not even a takedown. I do try
Right.
to like showcase when I do a takedown with
Sure.
it, but it doesn't have to be.
Well, the takedowns look ways better in the reels, right? So everybody wants to click the takedowns. But I don't think I like you point out, that's not really like maybe 1 in 10 or something is a takedown. But the beauty of that shell too is, I'm not even sure if I can show it super well on how close I am, but there's that space that people leave open between their torso and their and that, you can scoop up as long as you can get the arm away and make that space.
Yep.
There's stuff that can happen there. And I do think that the two ways positionally that I have found the most success with to get there, 2-on-1, and if you can get like a arm triangle, like an arm in arm triangle where the arm is up, then you can start to do some of this stuff. Obviously there are times where people just give you things because they don't know
Sure.
anything about anything. Although I guarantee you do it once to them and then they'll know for the rest of their lives. They'll never, every time you start to grab a wrist, they're going to be like, nope. And then you start punching people. So, and that's just the game that you play. It's like, can I get to this? No. If they're doing this, then I hit them. And then if they extend to try and get me to stop hitting them, then you take their arm.
Yep.
And then you
Yep.
just cycle back and forth, cycle back and forth. To me, the theory sounds credible enough. It's just a matter of, can I get good enough to actually do that to people? The answer right now is not consistently. I'll tell you that much. But the other part of it too is like some of those stuff. Like for me, if I had to pick my 3 Aikido techniques, right, I would probably say Sankyo. I really want Shihonage to be a thing. It's probably my weakest of the 3, but Sankyo, Shihonage, and like Irimi Nage, or maybe even Kokyu Nage. I train mostly in the jacket, so I very much like to grab people by the back of their collar, and kind of like if you see a mother dog pick up her puppies, and, and then yoink people off their feet, even if they don't fall down. Now they're so bent out of shape that again, there's your over the top elbows or whatever. Those are kind of my 3 that I like. I do like my hip throws and things like that, but I kind of do mine in more of a judo fashion most of the time. So those would be my 3. And I'm definitely I get the most results out of the Oriminage just because of my point sparring background. I am pretty good with on my feet and kind of juking people out and getting around them. And then it's not so bad. Even if you just get to a body lock, right, and then you can sneak up to that collar, you're good.
I think Kirinage is probably one of the more like versatile and in terms of setup techniques that I've experienced. So again, like I don't have an Aikido belt at all. even though like I'm honorary member or whatever in that.
Sure.
But like for me, three that I find myself most consistently that I most consistently successfully use in rolling sessions, and not just like against white belts and bullying them with wrist locks, but just like genuine. Even that does happen. Like
Oh no,
everybody.
that's a good time. What else are wrist locks for if not bullying people who have absolutely no idea?
um, but I was gonna say it's definitely iriminage,
Mm,
kotegaeshi, and kaitenage. That's three for me.
yeah.
Kaitenage, especially recently, I've been doing it so much, and I'm developing more things for the system around it, and even like getting anaconda chokes and Tars chokes and stuff like that from a Kaitenage setups, and it's crazy because quite often I get the position where I'm pushing down on the head and pushing the arm up, whether it be
Yep.
by the wrist, by the armpit, and just like sliding into a Darce choke or a guillotine or just
Yeah.
ending the person.
You know,
It's so good. It
if
works
I
so
had
well.
to pick a fourth one, I probably would pick Iriminage. And just from, again, I'm coming more from a jacket wrestling point of view, but because snapping people down is so much easier with the lapels,
Right.
like snapping people down, circling, and then getting that arm, or even just getting kind of the head in sort of a front headlock is a lot easier. One of the other ones I like, I only do this to people that I'm comfortable with because it is kind of mean. But if you get an underhook on people and then push their face away,
Yeah.
it's it stretches
I
that
love
arm out. And you can do like Ikkyo from there if you want, but I've always found that the Kaitanage is more that appears more from there for me at least. And then from there, once they have them in the Kaitanage, you can do all kinds of horrible things to them, like knee them in the face. You don't even have to throw them. Again, it's just a posture break. And I again think that that's just so much more useful in some ways than trying to force a throw where there doesn't necessarily need to be one. If you have someone's posture broken and they can't effectively attack you and you can throw most of your weapons, you're done. That's it. You don't need anything else. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think Kaitanage is really good. Like I said, I love the body movement portion of Shihonage, so I really want Shihonage to be a thing. But it's almost like just in terms of economy of motion, it's almost too many steps.
done it only once, like literally just once in rolling session, and not for lack of trying. So, but
Yeah,
I'm not the most skilled. So certainly, somebody could be better at it. But I
well,
do think it does show that it's
have
hard.
you as a Kotagaish aficionado, that does seem to be the one that's most popular I've seen with people who are doing this. As a Kotagaish aficionado, have you ever experienced uh, or have you incorporated the reverse Kotagaish at all? So if like instead of like the normal way, you reach under and kind of chop at the wrist and go down.
Two times. Two times. So if you're meaning like I bend it, but I like go like almost like I
Yeah, it's like you would.
crocodile.
It's hard to show without a partner. I'm sitting here like, how am I going to show this?
Like,
Yeah, it's not the basic one where you have the
like
wrist
this,
over. It's you reach under almost like you're going to cut like a shihonage, but it's
like
all on the wrist.
like this, right? So I grab
Yes.
from underneath. I've done
Yeah.
it twice, but like I haven't experimented with it as much because I find it much easier to grab from above when I'm
Yeah.
trying to do it, and then I do like the wakigatame or the
Yeah.
tank whatever. But I've done it twice when I was receiving like a lot of forward pressure. Like
Yes.
what I did, I remember. I think I went for a Russian 2-on-1, and I had it
Hmm.
here, and I was getting like punched and pushed forward because I think we were doing not necessarily harder sparring, but we were doing
Yeah.
like a bit more like engaging sparring. It was before we did our first MMA fights as a group, I think, and it was against Josip, and I think he was idea was, well, I'm not gonna be able to break his like typical stuff that I do, so I'm gonna push forward. And he was getting me, but I just slid down and I headed somewhere here, and he was essentially running with me, and I just swung it like a
Yeah.
golf takedown. I think I did it twice, and it did result in a takedown, even though I didn't have the control, because it's almost like the tie snap and like the golf swing.
Yeah.
You lose the control after.
Yeah.
But I did do it twice, so
that is the hardest. Well, I just bring it up just because that's kind of my favorite sneaky one. Just because, at least in a gi, when people are fighting grips for you and their hands are kind of floating out in space, it's easy to go snatch, cut, and it makes people smile and an appreciation. We'll say it's an enlightening experience. That's one of those things that you only ever get once, because people then are super sensitive about it. But yeah, I mean, what you were talking about with the forward pressure and stuff, I really do think that's where a lot of this stuff um, comes out the best in some ways. I think like competitive combat sports has people now so programmed, and not for good reason. I'm not blaming people for doing this, but so programmed to be conservative with themselves. They don't, it's like, well, in BJJ spaces, it's about this is high risk or low risk or whatever. And but even in striking spaces, people want to put up their guard, hang out in their guard, and only take the shots where they really feel that they're going to get anything. And that's a really difficult environment to get some of this stuff to work. I have been a long time fan of sumo, actually, and you see aikido and sumo pretty regularly because those push out rules are just so damn severe. Yeah, exactly. In fact, I think if we ever were going to, I know that Tamiki Aikido is a thing for somebody that's going to post the comments, but if we were ever going to sportify Aikido in any way, I think that severe push-out rules has to be a part of the equation. Because if you're trying to bring out the techniques, right? Obviously, the metaphor, not the metaphor, the street, however you want to paraphrase that, isn't it exactly isn't doesn't have push out rules, right? Nor do most combat sports. I mean, some do, like judo has push out rules technically, but you got to go out of bounds like a gazillion times before it matters.
Have a push out rule if you're on a walkway and there's a highway road.
True. Well, and there is something to that. Like, this is not a combat sport that I would ever want to participate in, but I have always wondered what MMA would look like if you just put like a table and some chairs in the middle of the ring. It's just like, how does that change the meta? Because it would change the meta. It's like, not only might somebody try to pick those up, but if you're falling into those or tripping over those, or what about an octagon that's on a tilt? There's so much to it. It's kind of what the karate combat thing is in a way. They're sort of flirting with that a little bit, but it's like, what happens if there are obstacles around? I don't know how viewer friendly that would be. I don't know if I would want to participate in that, but it would be an interesting, it would be a cool YouTube video for somebody to do. If they could figure out a way to make it safe. But it's like, what happens when you put the obstacles in the way? Because you're right, there are people who are moving. Or what happens when you put people in a literal alley when there's only so many square meters of space. So
that's a whole this might be a bit of a segue, but I'm sure we'll find our way back. But
well, while you're talking, go ahead and keep talking. I'm gonna go grab my phone charger because otherwise I'm gonna run out of power. Go ahead.
Right. I was gonna say, so also one thing in terms of defending traditional arts that I enjoy, and in the same way like Aikido, it's not like I'm not bringing a modernization of Aikido, but I'm also not like, it's just my opinion. Wing Chun is definitely a huge thing of mine as well. And speaking of small spaces, speaking of corridors or like bathrooms, in my experience, when we would test stuff, that's where like an ungodly amount of clear-cut Wing Chun theory comes out just like this. like we'd experiment. We have like there in our we train at two places. It's under the same club, but there's two physical locations, and one of them has like a little like blocked corridor thing where
Yeah.
it used to be a part of like what do you call it, where you put your clothes. My English is breaking for some reason. Uh, Locker room, but it was opened up, and now it's just a storage place. So what we did is we removed a bunch of stuff and we put tatamis on the walls, on the floor, and it's essentially just like almost 2 by 2 in meters of a little space. We put on gloves, put on elbow pads and helmets. Let's fight, let's spar, takedowns,
Yeah.
everything, just MMA. You know what it looked like the most? Wing Chun. It's
Yeah.
much of it. There's no looping punches. You have no space. What do you go for? You
Yep.
go very quick, direct stuff. Grab the arms. You're constantly in that clinch space. You can't just knee and then rotate and throw a person to the left like in Muay Thai. You have to be direct. You have to keep on the pressure, because if you don't, you're gonna get thrown. And it's like the tripod structure, the unmoving elbow, like everything just like this comes out. And it's
do think Wing Chun is, and I say this as a supreme outside observer. Like, I've never trained it. I don't even think I know anybody that trains it, but I do kind of keep one ear on that kind of sphere just because it does get lumped in so much with Aikido. But anyway, I do think that Wing Chun is one of those martial arts that has been extremely victimized by kind of, the commodifying, I guess, of martial arts, just because like a you don't typically, like, I don't know, if you have a new person who's showing up to your gym or whatever, and you're like, yeah, we're gonna put on helmet and elbow pads, and we're gonna go out into the street next to the facility, where there's no space, and then we're going to train. That's probably going to scare away most of your customers on day one. There will be a subsection of people who are like, this is great, but for the most part, there will be people who are not going to like that. And then the other part of that is Wing Chun's range, its preferred range, which is similar to Aikido, I think, is that clinch range. And I think one of the problems with both of these arts is that because you are a Wing Chun guy who is training with other Wing Chun guys, um, everybody wants to fight at that range. So you don't have to earn that range. And it's like you don't have to fight your way into the clinch, nor do you have to like get a wrestler off your leg so you can do the things you want to do. And I think that's a skill that's kind of lost in some of these arts. I really do think that, like, if I were going to, and again, I'm not part of this sphere, so I don't want to tell people how to run their schools. But if I were a Wing Chun guy, I think I would have wrestlers come in or judo guys come in, or like have a grappler come in, teach grappling just so my students can play the role of a grappler in sparring sessions. That way you can drill that, and vice versa. Have somebody who's like a long range boxer come in and teach how to be kind of a long range boxer. That way you can have students play the role of a long range boxer. I'm not saying that they have to be like, super crazy high level at it, but that way that those Wing Chun guys can practice getting into the range that they want to be at. Which again, I think is a problem with a lot of martial arts. It's not just, in fact, even some modern martial arts, you could argue, suffer from this, where boxers are really just skilled at defeating boxers. And vice versa. It's like people always talk about the, like, what's the best martial art for grappling? And it's like, well, the best person to beat a wrestler is a wrestler, because they spend their whole careers beating other wrestlers. So it's kind of a moot point in that regard. And I get that it's fun to talk about. It's kind of one of those, open up a beer and chat with your boys. It's a fun topic, but it's not insightful most of the time. I don't think you're not going to learn a whole lot about that. And that's not to say there aren't some martial arts that are better at being martial, but I think then we get into a discussion about like psychology and things like that. Wrestlers are probably just better martial artists than, say, Aikido guys, because wrestlers are usually freakishly fit, and exactly, they have a mentality that, like, is just they're workaholics, and they're not afraid of getting hurt. Whereas a lot of the traditional martial arts these days, as soon as you start to punch them in the face, everything goes out the window. I have a video that I'm not. It's my channel's weakest video because I wasn't very articulate with what I had. It was something along the lines of "you got to spar hard," and a lot of the comments there were like, "Oh no, people spar playful and things like that." And I agree. Like most of the time, I think you should be sparring in a playful, kind of creative way. The point of that video that I was really trying to make, though, is that if you get hit, if you take a liver shot and you shut down, then this stuff is not going to work when you want it to work. You have to be able to take some amount of abuse and
Yes.
then be able to function. Now, don't get me wrong, I get that not everybody wants to take that abuse, but there's a lot of people that like to talk about self-defense and then never take a hard hit
Exactly.
during the self-defense training. And it's like it's not like that. You're gonna get hit. Especially if you're doing a clinch art like Aikido, like Wing Chun. I'm sorry, but oftentimes the cost of getting into clinch is face tanking some things, especially when you're not very good at it. Like in the early days when you're trying to get good at getting the clinch, you're gonna eat punches. It just is what it is. It's not fun. No one likes it.
Exactly, but regardless of the level, like for me, when I fought everybody that I did in MMA, they're about my skill level. So even if I'm good compared to some other people with that range, that guy is also my level. So we're gonna mutually get punched. We're both gonna get hurt, no matter how good I am. That like the clear cut insta win, like Hamza Chimaev in the UFC or Habib with
Yeah.
Web. That's rare. That's not the common thing. Like you're gonna get clipped, and it's sort of like a mythical being that like punching somebody,
It
never
is.
getting hit, and maybe in pre-fight situations, like in street fight videos, you see that like sucker
Sure.
punches, whatever. But that's totally different thing than when you're straight up. So,
And I think what you're describing there, to kind of rope back into what we were talking briefly about the internet and things, I think that the internet kind of has people primed to look for these solutions. I've got a buddy that calls them meta hounds because they're constantly looking for like that one thing that it's kind of like that old meme that used to float around. It's like 4 out of 5 dentists hate him for this one weird trick. And it's like it's not like that. It's or I have one video too where I'm talking about like I had a friend who was like some technique in I think it was Osotogari, but it's like some technique in judo doesn't work, and it's like maybe it doesn't work for you, but the reason that it works for some of these Olympians is that that's all they do. That's I mean it's like this Uchimata, they could Uchimata you in their sleep because they've dropped 20,000 hours into Uchimata, not judo, Uchimata, just
yeah, yes,
Uchimata. It's like
the
and
art
it's
of
it
that technique, right? Like
right.
that's yeah.
It's and then on top of that, not to extrapolate this out even farther, but people also have to realize that if people are talking about it on the internet, then people already know how to defend against it. If you are constantly chasing the new thing that is going to help you defeat the meta, you are too late.
Yeah,
The thing is that like even if we take a really well-known example, my favorite one is John Danaher and the leg lock system.
right.
Most people, unless your name was Dean Lister at the time, famously, uh, uh, unless your name was Dean Lister at the time, most people were like, it's either scummy or it doesn't work or whatever. And what John Danaher did was basically lock himself in a gym with 5 of the world's top athletes in that particular space. And then for 5 years, it took 5 years to develop this into a coherent, consistent system. When people look at things like Aikido, for example, and they are trying to do whatever technique you want, and they're like, well, I tried it for 2 weeks. It's like, that's not a
Nope.
that's not it's not a thing. BJJ was in a much healthier place than what Aikido is right now.
Right.
And Danaher had access to top athletes, and Danaher is a top coach. We're a bunch of guys basically playing with this in our garages. So it's not gonna happen overnight. And when it comes to these, like, well, we need to reinvent the meta. It's like, well, you better be super special to do that, either intellectually or athletically. But at the end of the day, you need both, and it's
Yeah,
rare to get that lightning in a bottle kind of moments where you have a Danaher and a Gordon Ryan or a Gary Tonin or whatever in the room to work on this stuff. And on top of that, they have to be unorthodox enough to realize that this thing that everybody says sucks actually doesn't.
yeah,
And we're willing to invest 5 years of our time into it
yeah,
to make it good.
yeah.
Those are
And
really rare circumstances.
right, and just navigating the avoiding of the sunk cost fallacy, that's its own problem, especially in martial arts. Like, so much of that happens where, like, you think you are on a right path, and you can so easily, just by nature of it, just fall into a sunk cost situation where you want this to work, you want this to happen. It's not as easy or simple, and it's actually quite taxing on your mental state as
Well,
well if you're really trying to do it. So
to be completely honest with you, I fall in and out of love with Aikido on a regular basis.
yeah,
This is something that people probably don't see on the channel because I post and you don't see behind the scenes that much. And maybe there's some vlog content there, or more live streams or something. But the reality is that a lot of the times I'll get to these positions and be like, yeah, but like I could just hip throw this guy. It's
yeah,
so much easier to just hip throw a guy. It's just better. I'm already better at it. And the only thing that keeps me coming back is the fact that I do hope that somebody sees this stuff and is like, well, I can do that in a way that maybe is unique or novel, or I have the athleticism to do it in a way that he's doing. Just to kind of give people the inspiration. But it's also one of those things where it's like, yeah, you do have to navigate the sunk cost fallacy, but also it will never work if you're not doing it. So it's
exactly.
like, uh, so where does that leave us? There's a part of me that always just wants to punch people or elbow people or whatever and call it a day. But the flip
And
side
it's
of that is I've
so
had it
important
work
not
enough.
to force things. Sorry, yeah,
Yeah, it's just I've had like the Sankyo or whatever work enough where I'm like, I know if I can just figure out a way to make this even like 20% more consistent,
right.
probably golden. So and that's not to say that like Sankyo is ever going to become the new single leg. That's never gonna be a thing. It's just not. I'd love for it to be, but that's unrealistic.
But it's not. Yeah.
Um, but maybe some of these positions and things, I think one of the underlooked at things in Aikido, for example, is like that movement, the big circular movements where people are kind of like falling all over themselves to keep up.
Yeah.
Again, we talk about posture breaks. You don't have to throw people at the end of that. If they're falling down to keep up with you, and then as they come up, you hit them in the face. That's still Aikido. That's still the art. I know there'll be people out there like that's not real, but it is. You are. That's. I
You
didn't
know,
learn that from judo.
right. And you know how many times whenever I'm sparring a much heavier person than me, and admittedly, most of the time when they were larger people, they were less skilled than me. Like, uh, not often did I get the chance to train with somebody much heavier, much stronger than me, who was actually much better or at my level. It usually is a bigger guy, but he joined a bit later and still competent enough, but not like a crazy athletic guy, because I wouldn't be able to do anything just by the nature of it,
Right.
because more skilled people who are smaller than me have beaten the shit out of me, in fact, many
Yeah.
times before. So it's not, I just always want to put a disclaimer where it's like, oh, that just worked because he's unskilled. Like, screw those conversations. But what I was gonna say, I tried the Kuragayashi, but whenever I tried them with those guys, what happens is they don't fall, they crumble a bit, they get their arm, and I get their back. It's
Yeah.
such a perfect thing. It's like anytime, almost without a fault, when I would get a proper Kuragayashi with a heavier guy, that's like 9 out of 10 times that was the result. They
Yeah.
crumble a bit, and I get the perfect back take, which I wouldn't be able to do otherwise because they're much larger, much bigger. They're
Right.
putting the stiff arming. I can't get in there. I try to shoot. They just bonk me aside. And
Exactly.
suddenly, just a tiny wrist lock for a couple of seconds, I get the back. Isn't that like, why is that wrong? Well, it wasn't a clear takedown. It's not a kotegaeshi. It absolutely is. It's
It
like,
is.
what, I
Even
used it for a single, I switched it to a double. It's both techniques.
definitionally, I would say that's a kotegaeshi, because it's like I hate to argue semantics with people like this, but I would also point out that kotegaeshi is not a nage waza necessarily.
Exactly.
Kotegaeshi is kotegaeshi. We don't call it kotegaeshi nage. If we
Exactly.
did, it would be a throw. And sometimes it can be a takedown. Like sometimes that's just what happens. But the reality is, like, if you get this and people are falling all over themselves or bending out of posture and it's a setup for something else, you still kotegaesh them. It's not, it's again, I know that's a little bit of a wordplay argument, but people in general, I think that's a useful principle to apply, because it's not always this zero sum game where it's like, well, it didn't work exactly the way it worked in it would be like watching a movie and thinking that, like, trying to think of a good example, Wing Chun, for example, all those Ip Man or movies. Um, it's not gonna look like that. It's like, and likewise, it's not gonna look like the way it does in demonstration, because the reality is, like, the point of demonstrations historically in martial arts is to A, entertain people, and B, get people interested so you can sell them your art. That's it.
And here's
So
the thing as well. If I'm not interjecting again, I have a
no, go ahead.
tendency to do so. But perfect example with Aikido, and that's what the Kresho, the coach guy, told us about, and told me about how they would be doing it. So okay, he told me. So he's seen the footage of me doing the kotegaeshi to a heavier guy. He crumbled a bit. It was an angle from essentially behind, so you don't really
Yeah.
see as much. But if you look closer, you see that that's what's happening. He crumbles. I get the back, and now he says, "So you want to teach a person how to do that? You got to explain to them what a kotegaeshi is. Would they be able to see clearly what you're doing in that video, or in a typical Aikido demonstration where you clearly see the movement, you clearly see the snatching of the wrist, and you clearly see the ending point? I choose the second one. Even though this was the functional one, this is what they're going to be able to see conceptually. Oh, so you're bending the wrist that way after you're moving them, and then you snap. That's so much easier to just visually learn. And that's the first step. Like, most people that don't know martial arts, when they watch UFC, they have no clue what's happening, especially on the ground. It's like, oh, they're doing stuff, but they don't know because you haven't visually understood it yet. So that's a
You know,
great example for a demo as well.
you bring that up, and I think there's a lot of that goes on. This is a pet theory of mine, so I do not have the sources. So take this on with a grain of salt, a boulder of salt, even. But I have long wondered, for example, you just talking about teaching methods, like the whole like knee walking thing in Aikido. When the Daito Ryu founder was going around teaching people this stuff, it was mostly in seminar spaces in rooms that were really teeny. And I've long wondered, is it just because they didn't have the space? It's like, did they just not have the space to train standing up? And because I think about like BJJ gyms, like how many gyms will be like, we don't train takedowns because we train like a chicken coop. It's like there's no space. But to your point, yeah, you are correct. We work with small joints, and people need to see stuff. If they don't see what's going on, then they can't reproduce it. And to that point too, I would also say that, like, there's a lot of bad press online about cooperative training, and
Right.
cooperative training, when it's an end unto itself, is a problem. What I will say though is that at least when I was training like 30 hours, 25 hours a week doing Aikido, what that did do for me is I was much more able to be super tired, be hurt, and still do the patterns without
Right.
having to think about doing the patterns. And that's to me where the cooperative training side of things is helpful. I'm not super huge into like the pure ecological approach, as they're calling it these days, which is fine. Like, you do need to drill things, and you do need to test things and all that nonsense. But I think that cooperative training gets a bad rap too, and with Aikido especially, just because there is so much positional fidelity, I guess, like granularity to it. I feel like you kind of have to. It's not like grab guy, step one grab, step two throw. In many cases, there are some details to it. It's a little bit more like BJJ submissions in that sense, where it's like a little angular difference can mean something. Whereas with judo, nothing against judo, because there's a lot of technical detail to it too at higher levels. But with judo, you can sometimes get away with just being big, strong, get a good grip, throw. And with Aikido, it's like if you try to apply that the same way, there's some maybe you get to work, maybe like Aikiatosh, maybe hip throws, maybe if they really get a hold of your wrist and they like just throw their body weight on it like a complete asshole, maybe. But but to do it correctly, I think does require cooperative practice, and maybe more than what most people would feel comfortable admitting. That doesn't mean that can be its like the end though. I do think that you have to move on from that eventually, but it's just like drilling, like in wrestling or in judo. Like judo, they spend quite a bit of time on uchikomi and just setups and just getting the grips that they want to get. It's not even necessarily like, oh, I'm going to do the uchimata to you. It's like, I got to get this high collar grip before I can do anything. And a lot of practice is just getting to that point. And I think it's the same thing with Aikido. It's like, in some ways, we're kind of behind, or the traditional way of teaching is kind of behind because we kind of throw the whole technique at people, and it's just like, and make it work now. And that's why I think the positional fighting needs to be a thing if you want to make it consistent ever. It's that whole position before submission thing, or grip before throw, or whatever. That's kind of missing in the way that we practice. And then on top of that, adding on what we've already spoken about, which is realize that these aren't necessarily takedowns or tap outs. They can be. Sometimes they do manifest that way, but I think the majority of the time they're there to get you something else. Be that a back take, be that a clear shot to the face, whatever that is, be that moving somebody in front of somebody else, be that a disarm if you are a weapons guy, whatever it is, it's the whole like Aikido equals throws and takedowns.
No,
I think it's a bit of a false paradigm.
I do.
It's fun to practice that way. I actually like taking break falls, so maybe I'm a bit of a hypocrite in that regard. Like I'm a huge fan of doing the break falls. I even like the pretty version of Aikido. I'm not an advocate for yet. That's fighting.
Exactly.
For cardio, fantastic. For flexibility, even actually pretty good. It's and for learning the movement and learning how to move and learning the motions, not bad. But then when you have to wrestle or grapple, then that's where it usually falls apart and you need something else. Which again goes back to, if I were running my own place in a hypothetical timeline, I probably would have a class where it's like, this is just for the people that kind of want to make it look pretty and move around and then go home. And this is for the people who want to wrench off each other's arms and punch each other in the face. And maybe I probably wouldn't be the guy for it, but maybe I could have a teacher who wanted to do the. And this is what happens when you do have a knife in your hand, and they have a knife in their hand. It's like there's so many different ways to express the art, and they're all okay. That's the thing that bothers me. It's like everybody's like, no, it has to be one or the other. No, it doesn't. Please,
It really
please.
doesn't at all.
No,
Man, it's
it's just
insane.
like it's like there's this old debate here in Japan where it's like, which noodle do you like the best? Do you like the udon? Do you like the ramen? Or do you like the soba? And everybody's, it's like, it's weird tribalism. It's like, I go to all three of those restaurants.
Right.
They're all good on different days. So it's I don't know. It's like, but unfortunately too, like there's no motivation outside really to change things within Aikido, and there's certainly no motivation inside. Economically within Japan, they're subsidized by the government, so they're already getting money. And they have an established niche in the market, so they know who they're selling to, and we are not those people. It's just, unfortunately, we are not those people. Now, there are a couple outliers. It's like I met a guy during my university time who I've recently reconnected with, actually through my wife, who is also an Aikidoka. Um, and he trained vicious hard, so hard that we would he the foreigners at least, he's technically older than us, so this was probably a little rude by Japanese standards, but he does know that we were calling him this, and he had a good laugh about it. There's the whole senpai, the older, and the kohai, the younger,
Yeah.
and we used to call him the kohai destroyer in Japanese, because I don't know if it was his favorite technique or not, but like he would do this at Imanage, and he would do it in such a way where he would block your leg from behind you, and he would bring your head like in front of him. So if you imagine like a squared stance, he's like in a horse stance or like a corner stance, and he would use his arm to bring your head in front of you, so you would have to go over his leg to do the fall.
Oh, wow.
And it was, if you were smart, you would kind of turn to do like a forward big break fall. That was by far the most forgiving way to receive that throw. Most white belts and mid-rank belts were not quite smart enough, or did not have the break fall capability to pull that off. But he would just like bury you and then help you back up, and then bury you and then help you back up, and then bury you. And he would do that like 20 times in a row. And then he'd be like, all right, do you want to work on anything? And usually by then, like his partners were like, no, I'm ready to wander off. And then he would walk up and collect somebody else from the club and do the same thing. And before the night was through, he would have done like 150 reps of this Arimanage on people. And his technique is very sharp. Now, I would not say that he is a fighter necessarily. However, among the people there who I think was closest to becoming one, probably him, just by sheer number of repetitions. And he threw mean. Like he was one of those people where um, you better fall, because he'll rip your arm off and not apologize for it. Now, maybe he's mellowed out since then. I don't know. I haven't trained with him yet. This Saturday, I'm supposed to go hang out, and we'll see how that goes. But he, at least at the time, he was vicious. So my point being, you do find people who want to train a certain way, but it really is, they're kind of chance meetings, because there's no organized way to be like, all right, this is the class for the people that want to train that way. That just doesn't exist here in Japan, where you'd expect it to exist if it exists anywhere.
Yeah.
And in America, at least, it's even worse. So the American Aikido arena, that's not to say there aren't some good people out there. There are. I'm very fortunate to have one of the places that I do believe to be good, but for the most part, it's kind of what we would call West Coast Aikido, which is a very it's very new agey. We'll put it
Right.
that way. It's a very type of a person. But Aikido is not alone in that sense. American Judo, very famously, is kind of dying. I just watched a podcast with Travis Stevens. I'm not sure if you or the
Yeah.
chat knows who that is, but I know I think he was on BJJ Fanatics, and I was listening to him while I was cooking, and he was saying that American Judo is kind of in its dark days. There's the most likely people to go to the Olympics are like 16-year-old brown belts. There's no one doing high level judo
Ouch.
in America. Exactly. So it's so hard in the United States to find good places to train some of these things these days. And I have a hate love relationship with BJJ, because there's like 15 dojos or gyms for BJJ in every town. And then to find judo or aikido or even like a good karate place or something like that, you got to drive out to the middle of nowhere. I love where I trained, but literally my home dojo is a dojo out in the middle of a cornfield, which is just an Ohio thing, which is where I grew up and trained. That's kind of what we're known for. It's we are meme on the internet, completely unrelated to martial arts, for a good reason. There is nothing out there except you know corn and drugs, unfortunately. But the but I mean that's where you'd have to go to find these places, just out in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And here in Japan, unfortunately, the market is so defined, where it's like if you want to do judo, then you're doing competitive sport judo. If you want to do aikido, then you're probably doing this tai chi-esque kind of aikido. If you want to do karate, then you're doing point sparring karate. If you want to do, it goes on and on and on and on and on. And I've tried to break the mold of that. Um, and like I said, I really do want to check out this Kudo place. That should be fun, I hope. But even, yeah, fingers crossed. But even if they're awesome, even if they're fantastic, the reality is that Kudo does not allow standing
Yep.
joint locks.
Yep.
So all I can do then is get into position for those things or recruit people into my after hours cult. there's no
That's
there's
how we would do
nothing.
it. That's how
Yeah,
martial geek.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of how it has to be. It's unfortunate. I know I've kind of reiterated this several times just now in our conversation, but it's just like I feel like until somebody bucks up enough to make an organization, um, it's just going to be dudes on their free time with a similar interest figuring it out. Otherwise, it's going to be grassroots cults in the middle of nowhere. Um, and maybe we can all start a Discord channel or something where we just deposit our stuff. And maybe that's how it starts. I don't know.
Maybe.
Unfortunately, I'm not enough of a businessman to
Back to
undertake that. It's like I would love to be part of that. Where if somebody were taking the reins and they're like, "Hey, pay some membership fees, and I'll take care of all the lawyering and the brick and mortar place, and then we can all just get together." I'd be happy to be part of that. I just don't think I can be the guy to do that, especially now that I live in a country that's not my own and I want to be respectful of the customs and things. I don't want to start something, not know the laws, have somebody accidentally get broken, get
yep.
sued, have to pay a bunch of money, lose my visa, and go home. It's like there's more at stake for me than there would be necessarily in the United States.
Right.
So it's like I'm not sure I can be that guy. And there are some Japanese people who are trying to kind of do that thing,
Mhm.
but it's not it's not the way I would do it, if that makes any sense. It's like I think it kind of needs to be a bunch of guys getting together and just showing what they know and what they like. In some ways, I think it has to be like we all have to be relaxed and realize that there's no orthodoxy, there's no purity. We're all mutts who are homeless, um, and that's just how it has to be. And in that regard, I I kind of respect what the HEMA community is doing. I think it would be cool to model it after that. The only thing I don't like about the HEMA community is that there are purists even there. So it's like it would not have to be a purist. It would purist kind of thing. It would have to be a bunch of guys who realize that people may or may not like uh what we're doing, but uh, to share it nonetheless.
Yeah. And I think this type of stuff is the best start so far. Like this is the best that can be done at the moment. So just and
Yeah.
especially like these collab type things, because I've found like when you gave that post and everything, like it's actually surprising how large of an amount of people like us there actually are, because it's of course it's a smaller number compared to like other metrics and other things that we can compare, but like so far I have spoken to many martial arts YouTubers who did aikidokas, and they're all pretty much in the same position like we are here. Like
Yep.
Duncan from Aikido Silverdale, Robert Silas is there, Jamie from Jamie Loves Martial Arts,
Yep.
like us, and it's just and the aikido guy that I know in person who's our friend, and it's I feel like this is the best we can do right now, and just keep bringing content, keep collaborating, reiterating
Yeah.
the ideas,
we
and
we
we'll see.
almost need to find a way to, and I don't want to like put anybody on the line for this, so because I'm going to give a suggestion and then immediately be like, but I don't want responsibility. um so I don't know, maybe that makes me the bad guy, but we almost need a place where we can aggregate material and post it, even if it's not like YouTube content, where it's like I'm working on this. do those guys, do your friends have any suggestions? And but again, that would be like a Discord community or something like that, and it would have to be policed. Somebody would have to host it, yada yada yada. And I just don't want to be that guy. So I've had enough. I had enough
Right.
on my plate. So
Maybe an Instagram group for now.
yeah. It's but I would like to, it would be cool to see that, because you're right. One thing that was kind of motivating about that most recent post I made is how many comments were like, man, this is exactly my experience. I don't feel like I fit into the paradigm of whatever. I'm kind of out on my own, and just maybe it's me and one other guy or two other guys, and I've seen other people with that too, where it's like, what's his face over, is it Karate Culture or Karate, I don't know, I've seen karate guys like that. Ian Abernathy, it might be one, who are like, they're trying to do karate kind of like in the old Okinawan style, and there's like three of them, in their dojos. It's like, so, but there should be a place where people can come together. But I think we'd have to stipulate that you have to realize that everything you post is not going to be popular, and people are going to disagree, and that's fine. It's
Yeah.
okay. We're not creating a new martial art here with there's this orthodox, way of doing things. It's just, hey, I'm working on this. I'm running into this kind of trouble. You have any suggestions? And maybe
You
at
know,
that point, that's
yeah,
the way to grow it. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, it's all right. No, I'm the one cutting you off all the time. So, but I was gonna say, who I absolutely, absolutely love to get the chance to talk with, and it's such a stretch. It's never gonna happen in a billion years. But I did reach out on Facebook because I found them, but there's no chance it's gonna happen. But I'd absolutely love is Jason DeLucia, the guy
Yeah.
who did the first submission in the UFC before the Gracies, who
Yeah.
at the time was a JKD slash Five Animal style Kung Fu guy and an Aikido guy.
Yeah.
And he had the whole Combat Aikido DVD. It's on YouTube.
Yep.
It's everywhere. It's a
Yep.
great
I think I
channel.
have that saved in my watch later or something. Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And it's like, here you have a prolific fighter, famous martial artist who fought in the first UFC. He's fought people like Boss Rutan and all this stuff, and was never sort of like shameful or it wasn't before the UFC. He brought his stuff into the cage. Of course, he gets the same criticism. Where's the Aikido? Even though
Yeah.
you do see a couple of very specific things that he does with Russian 2-on-1s in some fights and this and that. But
Right.
we've argued with that before, and it's a stupid argument because, like we said, judokas have their uchimata and their osotogari, and that's what they do. But they know a billion other things in the
Right.
gym, so that's
People.
still. But like getting that person, holy shit! Like just the questions
Yeah.
I'd have is insane.
I wonder if he I don't know this. This is all speculation. I have no relation to the guy at all, and I've never spoken to him.
Yeah.
But I just wonder, some of those people in like the Chinese martial arts world and in the Aikido world and the Wing Chun world, a lot of them don't like to be online because of how the environment is. And like, there's a part of me where it's like, well, that's a little silly. Like, you should engage with people. But there's also a part of me that gets it. It's like, if I have a there's an instructor that I know very well that I respect quite a bit. He's an older guy, and he wasn't an older guy when I first started training, and he's a very good Yoshinkan Aikido guy. And my understanding for the longest time was that he was on Aikido forums for about like a month and was like, "This is awful," and everybody was just it was not a constructive place, and was just kind of swore off of it and just has never really come back. And there is a part of me that wonders how many skilled people are out there who just are like, I'm not dealing with the internet. And I can't blame them, because sometimes I'm running my YouTube channel and I look at the comments and I'm like,
Yep.
okay. So it's like, and YouTube, some of that is that YouTube is an imperfect platform. Like some people will post things, they're clearly new subscribers, it's not their fault, and it's like, well, I have a video where I talk exactly about what you're talking about, and I'll, got to send them a link or something. But there's other people who just feel like they need to use their anonymity to preach, and it's like, I'm just not interested. I don't mind that they're there for the most part. I typically don't like silencing, or what is it, muting or whatever it's called, people. The only time I genuinely do that is when they're like schizophrenically posting on my. It's like they wake up and the first thing they do is post on my video, and then they go grab a meal, and then they come back and they post on my video. It's like, dude, I can see it's like 14 minutes, 28 minutes, an hour and 30 minutes later, and they're all different posts. It's like, please go outside. Get some help. Those people usually do mute, because it's like, what are you doing here? But it just crowds the comment section. It's like, I'm not a big channel anyway, and people want to see other people's comments and not this guy's novel on why his very particular views are the most correct views ever. But yeah, it's the internet is such a weirdly tribalistic place, especially in this particular space. And I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's like young man monkey brain kind of thing. I've kind of have a pet theory where maybe it's a bunch of younger people who don't know things, and when you're young and you don't make money and you don't have a family, you revert back to the base form of feeling like you are valuable, and that is, can I do violence to other people? Because from a historical point of view, that's kind of what men were for, is they do violence and they keep violence away so they can pass on their genetic right. So there, maybe when you can't make money and you're not really part of society yet, you're a 22-year-old man, maybe being able to beat somebody up just matters more to you than me. I just don't care that much. It's like, I like my stuff to be functional, but it's not like, oh my gosh, I just don't care. I don't care about that. So I don't know. Maybe some of that is, I'm speculating completely. I've got no data to back that up whatsoever. All my speculation, and I think other people too. I do have a little bit more data on this. I think some people just have taken they drank the punch, as we would say in English. They've joined the cult, and everything that their teacher says is absolutely fundamentally true. And I would always say, be skeptical of those people. If there's anything to take away from this, if you are in the chat, it's that if your teacher, whether they're in traditional martial arts or not, does not let you go train somewhere else, please go train somewhere else. It's very weird. I know, like,
we had MMA guys do that, so it doesn't have to be a traditional thing.
No, it is not. It's sometimes it's just a cult of personality. It's like, it's MMA gyms can be just as bad as TMA McDojos. It's like, I've been to MMA gyms where it's like, don't train anywhere else, and also, you're brand new today, but here's your gloves. I hope you have a mouth protector. We're just going to spar. It's like, that's an idiotic way. And then they'll be like, well, why is nobody except my two best fighters staying on and paying membership fees? I don't know. Maybe it's because you're beating the shit out of people on their first day. So, it's like, that's the number one reason I see MMA gyms fail. And the number one reason I see BJJ gyms fail is because of culty mentality and not cleaning their mats. It's like, those are those are the two reasons I see those. And then those are kind of like the McDojo versions of modern martial arts. In my book, it's like they get almost so obsessed with being real that they hurt people. And it's like, then you're not teaching them. So it can happen to anybody. So, I mean, if you ever run into a gym that doesn't let you go cross train, be skeptical. They just want your money. So, and I that's the other part of like running a dojo or gym that I would feel worried about, because on one hand, like, you want to make enough money to at least break even and keep the lights on, but I would also be worried about giving people a product that is good. I don't like the belt system in many ways. Like, I just because it feels like breadcrumbing people. If I were to have a belt system, it would probably be like your white belt, your intermediate, your black. Congratulations. You know what I mean? It's like, and there probably wouldn't be a test either. It would probably be like there would be a test. It's just that the people wouldn't know that I'm testing them.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
exactly. That's
they would show up and be like, "This is a hard night of training." And it's like, "Yeah, congratulations. Here's your belt." So it's like I would not. I just I don't know. It's I would really have to think hard about how to monetize that in a way that I would feel is fair and respectable,
right.
and quality, and safe and reproducible. And like I said, I'm just like I think I could do the teaching side of it. I'm not claiming that I'm the best martial arts artist in the world, but I think I could teach people what I know fairly effectively. Take it or leave it. I'm not sure I could run the business side of it very
Yeah.
well.
That's how I
I
feel
would,
as well.
yeah. There's a part of me that hopes like the dream is that like YouTube takes off and I make money from YouTube and I can put that into a dojo where I can hire a lawyer to do that shit for me. Yeah, and it just all kind of and then the YouTube can become an advertising arm where we get people to come out and play.
Yeah,
It's like that's the dream, right? But it is also a dream, and I'm also very aware of the realism of that is not super high. I would
nope.
love it, I really would. But that's probably not a thing. I would definitely need to have a legal guy, and I would definitely need to have a business manager because I just don't trust myself enough to do it. And then there's all like, at least here, I don't even know super well like the laws and stuff and regulations in America. Add Japan and a language that is my second tongue. I'm okay with Japanese, but like I don't read Japanese law very well. And Japanese is an ambiguous language anyway. So who knows what they're sneaking into these contracts?
English is my second language, and I'm considered to be really good with English. Throw me any legal document, I'm fucked. Like
Yeah.
right away. Like I can speak it so well. I can just like YouTube is working out fine, and I've had so many English speaking friends from
Yep.
forever. So I got
Yep.
the head start, and I'm considered somebody who's really good at English.
Yep.
No chance I would be able to navigate. Like that would be such a pile of crap for me to deal
It
with.
is.
And
It's
it's so
my first language, and I can tell you straight up that I'm scared of it. I would have a. There's a reason. There's a reason that there's a lawyer. Even if I can read like I don't want to go too far off into the weeds here, but like the American tax code stresses me the
gee,
fuck out, man. Like constantly. And I don't want to again. I don't want to go into a tangent here, but like America is, I think, one of two or three countries that will make me file taxes with them on my Japanese salary, and if I don't do it correctly, they will come for me.
yeah,
They'll post. It's and that stresses me out. It's like I gotta hire a tax guy just so I can sleep at night. So it's you know I'm right there with you. And that worries me because for the most part, like I've been in and around dojos and gyms my whole life, and most people are not assholes. Like they aren't like those kinds of people where it's like, oh my gosh, I did something stupid and I hyperextended a knee and I'm gonna sue you.
yeah,
Most people don't do that. They typically know what they're in for. Um, where I trained, there was a liability waiver that you would have to sign, and like
sure.
I don't know how like legally powerful that is. I don't know if that's like a truly legally binding document or if that's more like something you would show in court to be like, you signed this, you knew better. But I don't know, like, does that win you and with all the technicalities or not? So, and that's what concerns me is like I would be that guy who unfortunately gets that one jerk off who is there to cause problems and kill the dojo. And then there's other things that are just kind of acts of God, like how many dojos and gyms have closed because of COVID,
Yeah,
and
it's
how do you prepare for that? You know what I
you
mean?
know
So exactly. So it would have to be, all the stars would have to align for me to do that. And like I'm very thankful that there were people in the comments who are like, yeah, just start a club or just start a group, go train in a park, go train in a sports facility. And maybe that is something I could do. I mean, other people do it. The gym, like the sports centers here in Japan are fascinating because they're basically just gigantic matted spaces that pretty much you just rent a portion of the space,
Yeah.
or you register for it or something, and then you go and you take classes there. And a lot of places that don't have brick and mortar facilities do that. So like a lot of these smaller martial arts, that's where I was learning Taito, by the way, for like
Definitely.
was at a sports center, which also, by the way, for the record, I'm not doing anymore, but it's not for any reason then it's not for them. It's not for any reason that those guys were great. Actually, it was just a matter of like my work changing and things like the
Right.
schedule lining up.
Right.
My point being is that you could go to a sports center, but then there's also the problem of like advertising and
Yeah.
all of that, and getting the people to actually show up. And in Japan at least, there is a big thing with like Japanese people want to see that long history tradition.
Right.
To
Right.
them, that's legitimate. If you're like, I'm trying this new thing, come play with me, they're probably going to be like, ah. And then on top of it, some white dude that some white dude with broken English who has a background in Japanese martial arts, or broken Japanese rather,
Yeah.
who has a background in Japanese martial arts. Why would I not just learn this shit from a Japanese dude?
Yeah.
And they kind of have a point. I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't argue with that from a marketing point of view, which
Sure.
is why I have always kind of thought that either like YouTube, Instagram, slash whatever has to come first. That way people can see that there is something there, and then
Right.
hopefully they come.
Right. And what we are thinking to do now that you're talking about like the business side of everything, like we're currently training at JJF Jiu Jitsu gym, and it's a part of a sport center sport thing.
Yeah,
And some of our members also go. There's like a combat sport gym right next to it, to the center, and they do MMA, boxing, wrestling, bunch of stuff. So sometimes people hop on to do kickboxing or whatever, and it's it's hit or miss depending on what you choose and with who you train. Uh, but it's its own thing. So that's essentially the only two like official formal places that we train at. Like I've trained at that gym a bit. We have some videos in there, like rings and cages, but more often than not, we're at the jujitsu, the JU hyphen jitsu gym, because
right.
and it's also a funny tangent that I'll try not go too far into, but the what's the biggest difference when you look at the techniques of BJJ and Japanese like jiu jitsu? Well, it's the you commonly write BJJ with JIU, and this
Yeah,
one is JU. That's the most important difference that there
yeah,
is.
pretty much. You know,
Right.
it it depends because it's like some of that with the Japanese jujitsu. Like I'm not usually like a does YouTube let me say this word? I'm gonna
Ooh.
backtrack. I was gonna fuck it. I was gonna say I'm usually not like a style Nazi or anything like that. Nazi
Right, right.
being the word I was afraid of.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Um,
That's funny.
the
We swear Nazis off limit.
Yeah, but I will say though that like with the Japanese jujitsu, although I don't have a particular issue with it, um, the one thing I would say is that I do typically like to know like what are we talking about, because some of the Japanese jujitsus, there's so many. They're kind of like Japanese jujitsu to me is kind of like saying Chinese martial arts.
Yeah,
What are
like
you
kung
talking
fu.
about? Yeah,
Like
exactly. Kung fu.
exactly like what
What
is
kung fu, right? That could be a grappling focus thing, that could be a long distance thing, that could be a so like when you say Japanese jiu-jitsu, that doesn't tell me a whole
anything.
lot. So it's like, and even like to a certain extent, you see that a little bit in something like BJJ, where it's like 10th Planet BJJ means something different than New Wave, that means different than some like B Team, right? They all kind of sort of have a style, like they're all BJJ, but
Mhm.
the schools are kind of the styles now. Um,
Right.
it's even worse in Japanese jiu-jitsu though, because they've had 100 years or whatever to differentiate themselves.
Yeah.
So so there's a little bit of that where it's like, I don't know. And I've seen some, at least in America, I've seen some Japanese jiu-jitsu places where like, yeah, we have a long line of blah 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 blah, and it's like, I speak enough Japanese to know that that name is bullshit. like they'll be like, yeah, I come from the I'm trying to think of a suitably dumb name. I come from the Black Dragon Death Strike Ryu, and it's like, that doesn't exist. that's not a thing.
Long tradition of 5 days.
Exactly. Like that's you just stuck some Asian sounding words together and you called it. At that point, just say that you have your own system and
Right.
drop the aesthetic, which brings me a little bit back to not to segue again here. I'm kind of feel like I'm going weaving, bobbing and weaving through this conversation, but with the Aikido thing, I suspect to a certain degree to shut some of the traditionalist stuff, you kind of have to call it something different.
Yeah.
And the reality is that it's undeniable that, at least for what I do, like I learned it from Aikido. So to me, it is that. But at the end of the day, it's also just nomenclature to me. It's just words.
Exactly. Like I've made at least a couple of videos on this, like how, especially for me, like in my position where I don't have an actual like lineage in a lot of these like martial arts that I'm interested in. Like when I do a koregaeshi, I mean, I've technically first time I've seen it was from Chin Na and from like different kung fu, where it was the butterfly wrist lock, and that's where I remembered it from. But then later on, I saw that people do talk about this technique and that it's called the koregaeshi and that it's most famous for that. And I call it Aikido, but I could also call it Aikijitsu, but I could also call it, look, I was doing a BJJ roll with a BJJ guy and I did this wrist lock, so I'm doing BJJ. And it gets so much worse in terms of classifying things the further you go and think about it. So, like,
and in many ways with the classifications, I think the classifications exist so people can sell things. I really do. I mean, how many Japanese martial arts are, at least I'm convinced of this, having studied the history so much, and I'm sure it's probably the same in China, where it's like, how many of these were just family styles? It was some guy who had his Osotogari, his Uchimata, and his whatever else, and maybe a couple strikes. Like, yeah, I won some fights with this, and if you want to learn it, then great. It's called my name, blah 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 Ryu, and that's it. But people take that and it's like it's a totally different style, and I'm like, yeah, the details might be different. Like I don't want to limit people. I don't want to limit it by saying like there is some truth to the idea that a body can only move so many ways, but there is also some truth to the idea that there are details that are important that are slightly different. What I will say is that people go way too far with the, well, to use Aikido for example, like the Aikikai guys, the Yoshinkan guys, and the Shotokan guys all have this bad habit of being like, what we do is totally different from what everybody else is doing. And it's like, no, it's really fucking not. And that was kind of my problem with reintegrating with the Aikikai is like, my background is with Yoshinkan and Aikikai combined, so I don't want to get too far into the weeds of lineage. But my teacher was an Aikikai guy, who his teacher was a Japanese Aikikai guy. That Japanese Aikikai guy died, and they gave it to the organization to his son, who was very not ready to be a head of an organization. We all broke away, and a Yoshinkan guy came along and was like, just join our stuff. So we are a weird blend of Aikikai and Yoshinkan, and some of my Aikido looks very Aikikai and some of it looks very Yoshinkan, and that freaks both of them out. So it's like I can't go to a Yoshinkan place because they're like, oh, you're doing it that way. And I can't go to an Aikikai place and they'll be like, oh, you're doing it that way. It's like, guys, it's just Aikido, man. So, and I haven't had bad experiences with the Tamiki guys, mostly because I train with them mostly incidentally. I haven't been to a formal school. I would love to. Way rarer here than you would expect. The closest one to me is an hour and 45 minutes north by train.
Oof.
which
Oof.
sucks. But maybe someday.
Here's what's funny. We don't have one in the entire country. So,
Yeah, I get the impression that's normal for the Tamiki
yeah.
Federation, at least. The impression that's normal. It seems like they have a big presence down in Osaka, but they everywhere else in Japan, like it's like obviously they're famously have a club at Waseda University and a few other places, but that they're very touch and go in terms of like how widespread they are.
Right.
And I assume that's probably they're just going to keep shrinking, which is sad. That's why I kind of feel like I got to get in while I can. But
Oh man,
they're
I'd
also
love
just
to
so
compete.
far away.
Right, I'd love to compete in Tomiki Aikido. That seems like such a fun rule set to do.
It
Because
does seem like a rule set.
yeah, it feels really neat. So definitely
would
it's
love
on my list.
I would love to hear the Japanese Aikido guys explain to me in no uncertain terms why there aren't that many wrist locks happening in Tamiki competitive Aikido.
Right.
That's not to say that they don't work. I'm not saying that somebody's going to run away with that clip.
Yeah.
But just like a lot of what scores in their system is like the Ariminages and what they would call a Temiwaza. I mean, it's not the Kotegaishis, it's not the Ikkyos, but they practice all that stuff religiously.
Yeah, practice it, and there's of all the wrist locky things like the actual wrist lock Tenkai Kote Hineri or like the battle Sankyo. That is seems to be of all the wrist locks I've seen, that's the one that everybody goes with. Like Tenkai Kote Hineri to me is Tomiki Aikido's wrist lock. That's like you jump under it almost like a Soi Nage or what's the reverse one, Soi Yotoshi. Like that type of motion with the wrist, that's so Tomiki in my head.
Yeah.
And other stuff is just like momentum stuff, like Shomenate or Irimi type stuff.
Yeah. Well, and that seems to be like you're right, the Tenkai Kote Hineri. They like there's a guy who unfortunately doesn't let you save his YouTube content to your playlists, but there's a guy out of Russia who has a lot of, if I can find it, I'll link you to it, or maybe I'll put it in chat or something, in Russia, who does a lot of the Tamiki stuff. And he has some really interesting variations and ideas on Tenkai Kote Hineri that just fascinating stuff. Like I wouldn't say that's like, wow, that's revolutionary or anything like that, but like I don't know, like he's kind of a golden goose in some ways to me, because like every time he posts a video that's technical in nature, at least I'm like, I see where they're going with this kind of thing. But it's like unfortunately finding a lot of this stuff, like I don't speak a lick of Russian. I don't like, I don't even know how I found that channel, but all of his like he has a couple videos that are older that are in English that are like competition highlights, and then the rest is like in Russian for Russians. You can't save the videos, you can't share them, you can't comment on them.
I think I've actually seen a video or two of that guy, because there was, I think, a competition like compilation or something, and then I went to that channel and was like, huh, this is weird. Like I thought it was gonna be like a more defined channel, and then I forgot about it. So it's
Let's see
likely
if I
that.
can find it. I'll post it in chat if I can. My computer's right here, so I'll look it up while we're chatting here, and I'll post it because I see people saying they want it.
And
I think
also,
I've
on that note,
subscribed.
we got a lot of comments and a lot of people discussing, and it often happens that I totally forget to respond. But we can go through if there are some specific questions before we end the stream when we feel like going through the.
Absolutely. Well, I found them. I'm getting to a point where I'm getting a text from my wife who probably wants to eat. And I'm starving her in the next room. So
Okay.
I should probably go cook. But if
Right.
you want to do a quick run through the
Run
chat
through,
right
then
now,
we can call it, and we can call it a day after that. So
I'm
okay,
posting.
so there's some weird ass dude called Tengu and says sounds like a 10-minute delay.
Yeah, he's probably very attractive, though.
You know that meme where there's like a job
or like some like office job guys, and the boss is like, we found this and that many broken like wood something. I'm butchering it outside. Does anybody know who could have done this? And then one of the coworker is tightening his green karate belt, and he's like, probably somebody really strong.
Probably someone really strong. Yeah.
Great. All right, so we have Pacific Brawling. Good morning, lol. He says this is at the beginning. That's also a channel that he left a few comments and followed the last live stream I did with Nick from One Man Stampede. And he says he's starting his own YouTube channel, and he's very much in the similar position like we are. So that's +1. So that's definitely awesome.
Yeah, I'll subscribe to you, man. Anything we can do to grow this little cult.
Yeah.
I should stop calling it that because I don't want it to be that, but it feels like that with really that many people. People. So I'll definitely after the stream go to anybody that's starting their own thing. I will happily subscribe.
Absolutely. And also we have the Technique Sponge, which is Josip or Joseph from Martial Geeks. And he always, every stream, spams this nonsense for shits and giggles and then leaves because he has stuff to do. But he's spamming Krilata Chuna, which I always have to explain to every single guest I have because he's being an ass. And that's essentially a wordplay in Croatian on Wing Chun, because Wing Chun, like phonetically in Croatian, sounds like winged penis. So there you go. Day ruined.
No, that's fantastic. There needs to be more raunchy jokes in martial arts. I've got a friend who is a BJJ guy, and the number of gay jokes that would not fly in politically correct company that comes out his mouth he's very self-aware. I'll put it that way.
Oh, we got Kuzushi Kev. I think I saw it like a glimpse of it, but finding a good Aikido place is like finding a needle in a haystack. Yeah, I felt that, especially if you're looking for something martial. That's true. Kuzushi Kev is an awesome channel. I'm not sure if you've seen his stuff. Like he does technique videos and that, but he's the guy who broke down every single jujitsu / aikijitsu / aikido and judo technique from the John Wick movies, and those videos are, mwah. And he's yeah, probably seen those. Those are pretty big. They got a lot of views, so good on you.
Well, if any of these people I don't want to have to repeat myself every time. If any of these people do have YouTube channels, I will go and subscribe to your guys' channel just so you guys know. Obviously, a boost is good. Any eyes on this stuff is fantastic because you never know when you're going to get that 8-year-old phenom athlete who just makes their whole martial arts career, and hopefully you do get somebody who is athletic and can carry some of this stuff, but also just grow the group. So happy to subscribe.
Absolutely. So these are all like specific to what we were talking about earlier. Like Pacific Brawling says he's in the same boat, like what we were saying, and all that stuff. And Max is awesome. He always joins and follows our channels, and he only says, "I only worry about my own training. What other people don't do is up to them," and that is true. Like that's when we were talking about like the hate bullshit that we were getting. And Pacific Brawling's talking about renting a room and probably trying to do stuff. And he's had like Pacific Brawling, he had like a situation with MMA guys where he was too weirdly traditional to them, so that left like a sour taste in his mouth. So that's unfortunate. That does happen. Even though MMA guys are usually the most open of all, in my experience. Like sometimes I spoke in the last live stream I did. Sometimes I've had MMA guys getting kotegaeshi better than BJJ guys. So,
well, you know what's interesting? Somebody, I don't want to keep the stream going too long, but somebody posted. Was it my channel or is it somewhere? I don't remember where I saw it. sorry if you're watching this, but I think it was my channel. Somebody was saying that like Aikido, with the exception of the gentleman that we were talking about a little while ago, has never really. There's not been a concerted effort to try and integrate it into MMA. There has not really been anybody who has done that. So it makes some sense that when those guys see something new, they they might be interested in seeing it. I think the only problem with breaking into MMA is that because it is such a competitive space, people want the techniques that they think are going to directly correlate to those wins in a career, which is understandable. But you got to break through that to a certain degree, I guess.
Yes, because the person that comes instantly to mind, and he's a bit of a controversial figure on YouTube, and he's in that weird space, but it's Dan the Wolfman. He's been doing that stuff for a long time, but even him, you can see that a lot of the techniques that he does showcase aren't necessarily stuff he or anybody else would have been using in MMA. Like, he has the similar approach to what we're talking about, like doing them for the sake of doing them because they're an option. There's even he who fought like legendary people and has a record and everything, even he isn't the guy who's shown 50 different Aikido things on TV in a pro fight. Like, that is almost a fantasy, even though I've said many times, I do want to be the guy to do a clear Kotegaeshi in amateur MMA. And I keep saying that. I'm not sure how likely that is to happen. I know I definitely can do it, but you know how chaotic MMA is and how rarely you can actually fight. So if I don't do it, like, I have to fight again and again until I get it. So
maybe if you wanted to do that, I would try to do. Okay, I want a backseat coach. But if you really wanted the Kotegaeshi, try to get a standing armbar first.
Yes.
Slide down, then go. I would think would probably be the way to go.
That's definitely a part of the game plan. Or not game plan, but system I'm working. If I do get it, and from strikes, that shit does happen often in sparring. It's just a different kind of pressure.
Yeah, you can get somebody to shell up and peel a hand or something. Maybe.
Yeah. Those are my two options. Yeah. Exactly. Like, we're like-minded, obviously, with this, so I'm not surprised that the first two things
same track.
Yeah. First two things you said are the exact things I'm thinking of.
Well, you have more experience with Kotegaeshi and sparring probably than I do. I think I've gotten it maybe once. I've gotten versions of Iriminage or Kokinage about a gazillion times. That's by far my favorite. And then Sankyo every once in a great moon or great while, every once in a new moon. And then Shihonage, like, I wish I could tell you that I got it. All the time.
I think I've got one. I got it one time, I'm pretty sure, and I do have it on the channel, but it.
We've lost him, folks.
Oh, we lost. We're back. For some reason, I was gone.
No worries.
I think your wife might be a bit angry, so the universe is agreeing with her and telling us to cut it very soon. But I'll link you the video, and I'm not even sure if that can be considered a Shihonage, because it did go into a more of a Kotegaeshi direction, but it was for a finger forelock. But it didn't go over. It was more like this.
Yeah.
That's the closest I've gotten to doing it.
So depending on how you do it. I know that some people that and the Tamiki guys do it exactly the way that you're talking about. And it's I think they do call it Tenkai Kotenet, but it's like a direct entry. Who's the guy I'm thinking of? I don't know. I've put him on my channel before. I could link things if you guys really want to see it. But I've got like a huge backlog of Aikido videos on my hard drive. Yeah, your audio is a little goofy.
Also, my phone is on 12% battery, so I
think everything. I'm living on a prayer as well. So
Right, and we got a lot of
Well-
awesome people. Aikido Silverdale was in the comments. Kazushi Cav, Max, JC. Sorry for not being able to get to you sooner, but anyways, we'll go through definitely. Ooh,
yeah,
some-
I'll poke through my time too, and people subscribe. But yeah, I think this is probably a good place to call it. I can hear my wife. So I should go cook something.
this was a pleasure, and this was
All right.
awesome. Definitely gonna do more stuff, but for now, that's it. That's about it. So.
All right. Peace, guys. Appreciate it. Catch you next time.